Welcome to Mecum Presents On the Move, brought to you by State Farm. It's the show geared toward keeping you up to speed with the latest auto news, event coverage, and expert industry insight. Now, here are your hosts, Matt Avery and John Kraman.
Hey, and welcome to another On the Move. We're so glad you've joined us today. My name is Matt Avery. I'm executive producer of The Transmission, and joining me is co-host John Kraman, lead TV commentator for Mecum Auctions on NBCSN. John, we have a really special segment 2 guest today. It is Matt Berger, fourth generation owner of Berger Chevrolet in Grand Rapids, Michigan, a dealership with a long-standing history and heritage of selling high-performance Chevrolets, and we're going to go into all of it. And then in segment 3, you and I had the chance to spend several hundred miles behind the wheel of a 2021 Dodge Charger RT, and we'll be going into our thoughts in an on-the-move review. Before we get into it, John, let's talk about the next Mecum auction, which is taking place in sunny Glendale, Arizona.
Yeah, this is going to be big, Matt. Auction, of course, is the next Mecum consignment auction, March 18th through the 20th, and what we refer to as the main attraction, the biggie for that auction, is vehicles from the Steve Todhunter Collection. 20 entries total, Matt, of which 3 of those are motorcycles, but the rest are all high-end cars. Talk about an eclectic mix. 7 Ferraris, there's a Mercedes-Benz, there's a Celine, there's 5 Mustang/Shelby variants, a couple of Dodges, and a Corvette as well. The Ferraris are incredible. They're typically late model cars, red, of course, and either extremely low miles or essentially delivery miles only. But this collection currently available to be looked at Mecum.com, and I suggest anybody to take a look at it. But there are a couple of standouts, Matt, that both you and I have had a discussion about. Let's begin with you. What have you got picked out you're going to be keeping your eyes on?
I'm going to go with a Cobra with some star power. So there's a 65 Shelby 427 Cobra that was owned by the late Paul Walker, the actor of the Fast and Furious franchise. You know, a lot of people know him for his enthusiasm and passion for European and Japanese sports cars, but come to find out, he also had a soft spot for American icons like this. This one was commissioned by Carroll in the late 1990s, and it does have that 427 cubic inch engine. And what I think is maybe even most fascinating is it's got some Ferrari flair to it. It's painted Rosa Corsa red and paired to a tan interior. So really striking combination. Definitely something I'll be keeping a close eye on. What about you, John? What are you liking?
Actually, yeah, Matt, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick a pair. These are running consecutively back-to-back, lot number S113 and S114. It's a pair of 1970 Boss 429 Mustangs, one of my favorite cars of all times, and they're both in great colors. One is grabber blue and one is grabber green. And of course, what makes these cars so important is that impressive, very exotic, semi-Hemi 429 cubic inch engine used only for one purpose, and that was so that to make this engine legal to go NASCAR racing. And of course, it wouldn't fit into this Mustang on the production line, so they had to contract with an engineering manufacturing outfit over in Michigan called Kar Kraft to actually do some pretty extensive modifications to shoehorn that behemoth in there. All these years later, when it comes to non-Shelby Mustangs, they routinely are the most sought after and the most valuable, and in my opinion, probably the best for long-term investment as well.
Turning our attention to some industry news, the merger between FCA and the PSA Group is complete, and now the new organization called Stellantis is one of the world's largest automotive groups. Now, a little bit of backstory. FCA, Fiat Chrysler Automobiles, had been the parent company for brands that we know here in the States, like Chrysler, Dodge, and Jeep. So now the company is going through another evolution of change. And John, let's talk about Chrysler's road to where we are today. They've gone through a lot of development and different changing hands over the years. Give us a rundown of how we got to where we are today.
You know, Matt, it is a fascinating story of a tremendous amount of evolution from Chrysler Corporation to Daimler to Cerberus and now to FCA, and now being brought in under the Stellantis fold. We have been told that there will be no apparent or immediate changes to the product line, even though they've added quite a few with a total of the 14 brands now. But those are primarily European market cars that we're not expecting to see here in the U.S. And a familiar name to all of us. Mike Manley, who's the former FCA CEO, he is going to continue to head up the operations here in North America for Stellantis. So I think that signals a couple things. Number one, that at the top is a real car guy, successful car guy. He's going to remain at the top. And just as importantly, and specifically for both the Ram and the Dodge division, I'm going to predict we're going to see a continued high interest in the priority on performance from both of those divisions.
Now, one of the other questions out there swirling is regarding the ramifications with all of these European brands that are not at present in the U.S. market. So just people are wondering, would that start to change? Now, John, I'll ask you, if you had to take a guess, what's your thought?
Well, they are saying that as of in the short term, no. But, long term, I just have to think that some of the merging technologies and the economies of scale that are probably going to be working out, maybe even as we move more towards electrification, probably some merging of that. But my guess is for the next 3 to 5 years, I doubt if we're going to see any changes other than just the massive amount of product improvements that we're seeing coming out of the former FCA, now Stellantis group, and specifically focusing on Jeep a bit with an all-new Grand Cherokee coming out, the Grand Wagoneer, and of course the hot one, the 392 Rubicon Jeep Wrangler that we're going to be seeing pretty soon as well. So it looks to me like this is a win-win for everybody involved, and they're saying they're going to try to, this merger is going to help keep their price down. That's why they did it. They're help keep their costs down. That's why they did it.
Right. Now, you mentioned electrification, which is a great segue to an all-new feature we'll be highlighting from time to time, and it's presented by State Farm and called Surprisingly Great Questions. And it's an opportunity for you and I to answer listeners' questions submitted via social media. And today, it's all about electric vehicles, starting with someone asked, how do electric vehicles work? Very basic question, very good question. Essentially, an electric vehicle has an onboard battery pack that is charged. You plug it in, you charge it up, and then when you drive, you're using electricity via electric motors to turn the wheels. Now, someone else asked, how many miles can I go on a single charge? If you look over the current lineup of the latest offerings, it's a range of around 150 miles to upwards of 400 miles, depending on what manufacturer you go with. Someone else wanted to know, how long does it take to charge? And again, that's going to vary because while it is as essentially as simple as plugging in your smartphone, plugging in your electric vehicle, it does vary depending on what level charging you're using. So if you use the most basic level 1, which is 120 volts, so that's your standard household outlet, it's going to take almost a full day, if not longer, to get any kind of significant range. Level 2 charging, that 240 volt charger, that's going to be more of an overnight charge where you can get the majority of your range. But right now, top dog is this level 3 charger, known also as a DC quick charger. Those are the kind of public stations that charge very quickly and where you can really get most of your range in under an hour's worth of time. Another question we got was, how much does an electric vehicle cost? Most of the entry-level offerings out there are starting in the mid $30,000 range, but there's a lot of luxury offerings coming in too, and those quickly run up to 6 figures. A final question is, how do I know where I can charge my electric vehicle? If you're at home or at the office, you know you have the opportunity to plug in, but what about if you're traveling somewhere new? For that, you can download a variety of apps that will show you charging stations along your route, making it very easy and convenient to find somewhere to pull off and plug in. Now, all of these have been great questions related to the world of electric vehicles, and we'll be exploring all kinds of other car questions in future segments down the road.
Mecum Auctions is proud to bring you On the Move with Matt Avery and John Kraman. For more on the world of collector cars, head over to mecum.com. Now let's get back to the show.
If you wanted a high-performance Chevrolet during the 1960s, one of the places buzzing with activity was Berger Chevrolet in Grand Rapids, Michigan. The dealership, in addition to sponsoring and promoting racing, also sold a ton of performance parts and cars, including a slew of the now legendary Copo cars. But the dealership's impact is much more far-reaching. They are one of the few 1960s muscle car dealerships still in operation today. And joining me now is Matt Berger, fourth generation owner who himself has been involved with some more contemporary performance programs. I can't wait to dive into them. Hey, Matt, we really appreciate you coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Now, several generations of your family have been involved with this business. Take us back. How did it all get started?
Well, actually, my great granddad started the store in 1925, and he was a third generation farmer. And I don't think farming was quite his bag. I don't think it was something that he really enjoyed. So when the cars started coming out, he went to work selling at the distributor in Grand Rapids and was very successful in sales, really knew the car well. And the distributor, they didn't really have a dealer organization back then. They had distributors in large metro areas and then sub dealers. So after he had been there for, I think, 3 years, they decided they were going to open a East Side branch office and selected him to run it. He ran it for a year and then they sold it to him. So he was around, right before the Depression and the crash of the stock market and everything. I'm not sure his timing was great, but so he kind of got things started. And, we've made it through. I'm actually the fourth generation. So my dad and my granddad, and, we've all been Chevy dealers. So it's been in the family for, just short of 100 years. And, yeah, it's been a great business and a great partnership. GM's been a terrific partner.
Over the years, Matt, how has the business grown in terms of scale and also size?
Yeah, we're actually in our third location. We started out with more of a downtown location, like most car dealers back in those times, and it was actually a 2-story building with an elevator in it, which is kind of an unusual thing. But anyway, we moved out to our current location, which is 28th Street, in about 1965, and gosh, we've grown from, I found a couple old financial statements from 1926, and I think their total annual sales were about $6,000.
Wow.
Now we got about 10 acres and sales of, probably 250 million this year. So.
Wow. Now, Matt, you've been exposed to the family business your entire life. You're obviously an integral part of it today, but take us back. What are some of your earliest memories of hanging around the dealership?
I don't know if my dad was trying to turn me into a car dealer at a very young age, or if it was just the circumstances surrounding it. But, back then, I was born in 59. So, I was a little guy in the 60s, 7, 8, 9 years old. My dad started taking me to the drag races. And, back then, drag racing was incredibly popular. And, I just fell in love. From the first time I heard a car fire up with open headers, I was hooked. So I started out going to the drags, and, my dad used to bring home all kinds of cool stuff, SS396 Chevelles and Camaro SSs and pace cars. And, he always drove a Corvette too. So he kind of got me going in the performance area. He was really into it. And, I wanted to be able to hang with my dad. And so we developed a lot of the same interests.
Now, you bring up one of the exciting and most notable chapters of the dealership history, and that's the 1960s activities, which involved supporting and promoting and selling a lot of performance. Give us an idea, how did your dad get clued into that market and really see value in pursuing those efforts?
Well, if you think about his, he graduated from high school in 1956. So obviously the Chevy V8 was something brand new, and I think made the Chevrolet brand a lot more youthful and performance oriented. That V8 changed a lot of things. And, like a lot of kids his age, he was kind of a gearhead back then, and, had cars with the mufflers cut off and spark plugs in the exhaust pipe so it'd shoot flames out the back. It was a little different era, different things. But I think he was kind of a gearhead. And when he started running the store in 1960, I think he kind of carried that forward and was always looking for opportunities to be involved in the performance end. It's kind of the fun part of our business. At least we certainly considered it that.
Sure. Now, one of the most remarkable things from that time was your dad's ability to get one of the legendary 1969 Camaro ZL1s created through the COPO program. Just 69 were built. All of them had an all-aluminum 427 cubic inch V8, a very extreme, high-performance, street-legal race car. Matt, fill us in. How in the world did your dad make that happen?
Well, he had been involved in the COPO program earlier than that. He and another fellow at the store were into the drag racing and performance parts. Had started to be an issue. Nicky and Chevrolet was doing a big job, both with car volume and performance parts, and we kind of took a cue from them and got into that business. The COPO part, I think, came through their connections on the parts side. We sold a lot of pieces to, nationally known drag racers at the time, and those guys were certainly cued into the COPO program and where to get their next race cars. So I think my dad kind of kept his ears open, and if he heard anything that he thought would be a good seller in Grand Rapids, he would sign up and order it.
Now, you mentioned earlier that your dad typically drove Corvettes. Thinking back over, I'm guessing the Mini that he drove and used regularly, any highlights for you?
Oh gosh, the thing that I think of from time to time is being a little guy, probably, I don't know, 6, 7 years old, sitting on his lap, shifting his 65 Corvette convertible. He had a kind of a light blue metallic, gorgeous stick shift with the chrome plated shifter knob and the bolt action shifter. And I'd sit on his lap, and he'd put my hand on the shifter and kind of run me through the gears. And I just thought that was the greatest thing ever.
Now, you have really fully embraced and carried on the family's legacy of promoting performance. And another exciting chapter in the Berger story where that's seen is that of the 4th Gen Camaros. You and your team created a run of several hundred Camaros that really changed the expectation of performance vehicles that could be found at a dealer level. You guys accomplished it by partnering with a performance shop in Marietta, Georgia called GMMG. Matt, give us some insight and shed some light. How did all those efforts come about?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story. I had built, I think 3 different Gen 3 cars. Taken a stock car and done some suspension and chassis mods and some engine mods. So I was kind of familiar with what the process was and what the kind of the pitfalls of that process were. I received a phone call in 1999 from a guy named Matt Murphy, and I actually knew Matt's father, Matt. Wow, there's a lot of Matts on this call. He was an executive, actually the regional manager for Chevrolet in Indianapolis, and a very well thought of executive with General Motors. Anyway, his son Matt called me and said, "Hey, would you guys be interested in doing a car?" And kind of a popular thing at the time was to put a set of chrome wheels and slap some stickers on it and call it a special edition. And I told Matt I really didn't have any interest in that. If it was a bold new graphics program, I wasn't a player. It had to have performance. It had to go faster, handle better, etc., or we weren't really interested. And he came up met with us, and we were a little skeptical that he would be able to put a package together at a price that would be attractive to retail buyers. But he did it. He built us a prototype. We gave him a 2000 SS. Actually, I think it was a 99 SS. And he took it back to Georgia. And, our thought process was, if General Motors could build 20 or 30 special cars, what would they look like? What would the badging look like? What would the wheels look like? How can we keep them, being a dealer, we wanted to keep the cars very OE. Very factory looking. So, and Matt was of the same mindset. He had a great eye for design and really understood the heritage of the Camaro and Chevrolet in general. So, excuse me, he ended up being a great partner and built some really cool stuff. And they were still affordable. You didn't have to spend $100,000 to buy one. I think the package price was, don't hold me to this, but I think about $7,000. So, for under 40 grand, you could get a really good looking car with great performance and something you're not going to see everywhere. I think the first year we built 40 or 50, over 3 years, I think we built 100 cars.
And one of the driving forces behind that program was the dealership's milestone anniversary of celebrating 75 years of being in business.
Yes, that's right. We had our 75th anniversary, and of course that was a pretty big milestone for all of us. I'd missed the first 50 years, but at 25,
yeah.
And And it was a great marketing opportunity for the car.
And from that initial offering, you and your team expanded the portfolio of performance Camaros to include other variants like the Z01 Supercar and the wide-body Dick Harrell. Give us some insight. How did those other programs come about?
Well, we started with the Berger SS and we liked the car, but, being gearheads and car builders, we're always looking for the next deal. You're really excited about the car you're building, and as soon as it's done, you're looking for the next one. And I think we were kind of the same way. So we were looking to, bump up the performance, and Matt was looking for potential projects, and we were all aware of the ZL1 history going back. So actually, GM had built a car that had an LS6 motor. So it had the current 400 horse Z06 Corvette motor, that LS6. And they were using it in the proving grounds and as a show car. And we thought that was a really cool combination. So I think I provided Matt with a car and an LS6 engine, and Matt built the first prototype. They ended up building actually 69 of those cars that were distributed nationally through other dealers as well. I think we did 28 of the 69, but so, guys that were in the business back in the day, the Penskes and some of the other stores that were big in the muscle car business or big in performance at that time in the around 2000, the guys that were still in it were all offered a car. The way we got the 28 cars is, we actually kind of distributed the cars between us, GMMG, and Chevrolet. And, the typical conversation, at the typical Chevy store, Camaros might not have been red hot right then. And we'd call them up and say, hey, we got this great Camaro 400, and it's only $60,000. So phone went dead, and we ended up with a ringtone. So I think a lot of guys didn't really understand how hot a piece that was going to be, and those cars sold out in days. So and there were some performance variants of those as well. You could Matt was having C5R engine blocks, which was basically the block for the Corvettes in Le Mans, and built 600 horsepower street motors with those. So you could buy the car, and the car came with a 400 horse motor, but if you wanted a phase 2 or a phase 3, you could run it back through a GMMG and boost the performance, which several people did.
Well, in addition to customers, Matt, I know you yourself also took advantage of the opportunity to dial up the performance, as during these 4th Gen Camaro programs, you made sure that typically you had a car built for yourself. And I know typically you made sure that it had all the performance that you could get.
It's a lot of fun. I started out, going to the races as a kid, and, I grew up kind of in the era of motocross bikes being, getting really popular. So we did a lot of that. So I've got some gasoline in my veins too. And, if we can make it go faster, corner better, stop better, any of those things, we always tried to, or I always tried to have a kind of a maximum version of one of those to drive around. And I think it helped on the R&D side too, because I knew if I couldn't break it, it probably wasn't going to break.
Now, Matt, let's talk about the impact that these cars are having on the world of car collecting, specifically Camaros with any kind of buy Berger connection, because when they come up for sale, they are bringing top dollars. Case in point, at Mecum's recent Muscle Car City auction, 2 of the high sellers were Camaros that had buy Berger history. One of them on the top 10 list was a 1969 Copo Camaro that sold for $297,000, while the other was one of those 4th Gen 2002 Z01 supercars that sold for $117,700. Both very strong figures and both good indicators of more to come. So I got to ask, what goes through your mind when you see this kind of passion for vehicles that once sat parked on your family's showroom floor?
Yeah, we're really as surprised as anybody that people would remember the name of a Chevy dealer, especially 1 out of 6,000 back then in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We're not exactly a hotbed for performance generally. There are, more churches in this market than there are bars or restaurants, and it's kind of a conservative Midwestern market. So, yeah, I was pretty shocked. We've been watching these things go through for the last, 15 years now. And, the money just keeps climbing. And, it was really my dad's thing, but, we try to leverage it even currently. Performance is a big thing at our dealership. And that doesn't just relate to fast cars. We're looking to be high performance in every area of the business and set the bar really high. And we've got an unbelievable team. And, that's a big part of our culture.
And like you touched on earlier, another big part is taking some time to have some fun and celebrate the past. And you guys do that with a big summer car show. When is that usually held?
It's usually the week before Memorial Weekend. We started it the first year we did our own cars. So the 2,000 cars that were done jointly between us and GMMG kind of kicked that whole thing off. We do it in the fall here in Michigan, kind of the tail end of the summer. There's usually between 250 and 350 really nice GM muscle cars. We probably get about 4,000 people within about a 6-hour stretch walking through, checking out the cars. And, we really didn't know what it was going to look like out of the gate. I didn't know if we were going to, be standing around talking to ourselves or if we did a decent crowd, but we were really pleasantly surprised. And, the West Michigan Camaro Club puts on the event. We pretty much give them the keys to the store and they do their own thing and they put the show on. But, yeah, it's been a big success. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do it this year, but we're planning on having the biggest one ever this year. So, it's been a lot of fun, and it kind of keeps that culture going and keeps that kind of muscle car thing going. We were able to a couple of years ago. We affiliated ourselves with a couple of Copo racers. The new style Copo Camaro, being raced in NHRA stock and super stock eliminator. We sponsor a 4-car team, and they actually brought the cars up to Martin Dragway, our local racetrack, local drag strip, and we did customer ride-alongs in the cars, which is, I got to tell you, that's a pretty exciting ride, doing a wheel stand for 100 feet and 9.25 mile.
Wow. Now, before I let you go, Matt, I got to ask, what are you currently driving? Because knowing you, my guess is it has some performance flavor to it.
Well, you got to remember, Matt, it's 19 degrees up here. So right now I'm in a Tahoe, but I've got a ZL1 1LE and some other stuff. The Corvettes are selling so good, I haven't been able to get near one of those yet. Away from my clients. So, but yeah, you can bet that I think I've got a ZL1 convertible ordered for the summer. So we'll have something. Some horsepower.
Well, very cool. Well, Matt, if listeners want to stay up to date with the dealership, where's the best place for them to head online?
BergerChevy.com is our website. Most of that information is there. If you want any show details, if you see the About Us tab, click on that, and it'll give you all the details for the show as far as dates and hotels and all that stuff. So, and if you happen to wander across a car that you want to buy, that's okay too.
Well, sounds good. Well, Matt, I have really enjoyed our time today. Berger Chevrolet is so special and unique. Of all the high-performance dealerships that were moving Chevrolets during the 1960s, there's not many out there that can say that they are still in business today and with such a passionate family behind them. This has been awesome, and I certainly look forward to seeing what you guys have in store down the road ahead.
Oh, thank you, Matt.
Don't adjust that dial. On the Move, we'll be right back. Our program is proudly presented by Mecum Auctions, the world's largest collector car auctions. Now back to Matt and John.
Hey, Matt, the 2021 Dodge Charger 4-door sedan, considered a full-size car, dates back in its current generation, Generation 7, all the way back to 2011. It's refreshed in 2015, and every year since then, the folks at Dodge have continued to sort of refine and push the envelope on performance and also on subtle appearance. And it really has come to peak in 2021. You and I both had a chance to spend almost 1,000 miles behind the wheel of a Tor Red, love that vintage color name, 2021 Charger RT with that 370 horsepower 5.7 liter Hemi, the smallest V8 in the Charger lineup, but with the aggressive active exhaust mode, it sure sounds a lot more potent than it really is.
Yeah, it did, John. You know, the other thing that stood out readily to both you and I, we talked about the entire time we were in the vehicle, is that despite that platform aging for as long as it has, you really wouldn't notice if you weren't looking for it. The car is very comfortable. We had the chance to drive not only on highway but some surface streets. It just seems like no matter what kind of circumstance you're driving in, it's comfortable, it's very plush, and it's really enjoyable.
It is, and I think one of the things that adds to sort of the refinement and also maximizing the power of that 370 horsepower Hemi is that 8-speed TorqueFlite automatic transmission. It is unbelievable, and we know, because this is sort of the trend of the future, that these multi-speed automatic transmissions always help keep that engine in its power band at all times. And while there are higher horsepower versions of the Dodge Charger available, you got the 485 horsepower, 717, all the way up to the Hellcat Redeye at 797 horsepower. This little vehicle is very satisfying to drive. And again, I think it's a combination of the throttle response, the boominess in the exhaust note, and the efficiency of that transmission. Fuel economy, nothing to write home about, but mid to upper 20s can be done at moderate speeds on the highway. But if you put any type of city driving into the mix, you're going to be probably averaging down in the high teens with a mix of city and highway driving. By the way, all worth it to me just to hear the rumble of that Hemi.
Yeah, it's got a great noise. Now, John, the other big surprise was the fact that this is a base car, but I didn't pick up on it at first just because it's not apparent that you're lacking a lot of options when you get inside. You still have the large multimedia system in the middle. And like I said, I mean, for a base car, it seems like there's a lot of value there.
There is. Dodge calls that 8.4-inch infotainment screen Uconnect, and it's very, very easy to operate. The standard stereo's got a great sound. It's 276 watts, by the way, and the seats have a really cool retro houndstooth insert. Now, this was a base car with cloth seats, but they had a lot of good side support. They looked really sporty, and that houndstooth, that gray and black checked houndstooth, just gave it a little bit of that connection to the 1970s. So I think the fact that Dodge has kept the spirit of the original Charger, which was, of course, a sporty two-door, they've kept it alive in the new world as a high-performance four-door sedan. I got my fingers crossed and hope that they continue to keep this car onto the market, because it really is filling a niche that in an affordable price range, we'll say a sub $40,000 price range, with a base price of around $36,000. They do have some incentives, and of course with discounts, you can buy them for less than that. But I hope that they keep this car going, because it offers pretty much the best bang for the buck in a high-performance, high-styled family sedan.
Well, and as you mentioned earlier, retro and nostalgia have been a big part of moving this vehicle off of dealer lots, and it's worked very, very well for a vehicle that has such a performance pedigree. The question is how much longer will those kind of tricks continue to work? Looking out even further, will Charger really get a full redesign or refresh, or will it kind of fade away and be used for something else, an SUV, a crossover, or even an electric vehicle?
Well, that's what everybody's asking, Matt. I think the same question can be applied to the Challenger as well, being also on an aging platform. But our conversations with the folks at Dodge have all led us to believe that our instincts might be correct, and that honestly and frankly, the current buyers like these cars. They really aren't demanding changes. And I think that as we continue to see very strong sales, I'm not sure what incentive or priority that Dodge is going to have to do some big sweeping changes. The fact that they have, over the past 3 or 4 years, added the ground effects and the spoilers and the aggressive hood scoops and 20-inch wheels and tires and all of those type of things to the entry-level V8 Charger says that they feel like just a little bit of tweaking on the platform and a little bit of small annual improvements is going to be enough to keep those sales up. And I hope so, Matt, because this car is a little bit of a throwback with a rear-wheel drive, rumbling V8 sedan, room for the whole family, at a price that within the scope of new vehicles is surprisingly affordable. Really nothing else out there like it.
Well, I think you're right, John, that you touched on one of the successful strategies for this model as well as the Challenger, which is that trickle-down effect where Dodge, I know they really ruffled feathers years ago when they killed the Viper platform, very successful two-door sports car, really the halo car that you would go into a Dodge showroom to see. I know that, like I said, when they pulled the plug, enthusiasts were up in arms everywhere, but man, has that strategy paid off? Because I would argue that not only for Challenger, but I think you're also seeing that bleeding over to the Charger, where that allowed them to focus on two models, in this case, two kind of muscle-oriented platforms, really develop a wide range of price points where you have everything from very basic V6 cars all the way up to those very aspirational, high-performance Hellcat Demon versions. And because of that, like you touched on, you can kind of pick and choose parts to put on different variations to keep interest going.
Well, and that's exactly right, Matt, because, see, this is a practical car. This is a car that can be used as a daily driver to haul your family around in, but at the same time has a image. It's got a prestige out there in the high-performance world, and it's got some swagger that I don't think anything else in that price range can come close to.
You've been listening to Mecum Presents On the Move, brought to you by State Farm. For more information, visit mecum.com. And join us again next time as we take you inside the world of muscle and collector cars and more.